2 decades ago, this figure was like 3% or 4%. Now, it's basically, if you look at just the population between 20 and 34, about 12% of the population between the ages of 20 and 34 have an undergrad degree or above, right?
Okay.
That's a pretty significant change
Yeah.
over the course of 2 decades.
Huh.
There are slightly more women in 2020. There are slightly more women between the age of 20 and 34 who have an undergrad degree compared to men. Okay. There are just slightly more women. So that again shows a dramatic change in terms of educational attainment. But this is the catch. The number of women working outside of agriculture, because agriculture में तो women अभी भी काम करती हैं, because a lot of the harder labor in agriculture is done by women. The number of women in remunerated work, so women getting paid for the work that they do, has actually not changed over the last 2 decades. There was about 9
of percentage.
In terms of, it was 9.5% back then. It's still, I think, 9.9% or 9.8% over 20 years, right?
Yeah.
What we're basically seeing is people are getting educated. They're getting educated in higher numbers, but women aren't working, and the kind of work that men are able to do is also not particularly stable. It's not particularly rewarding, and it doesn't necessarily guarantee a means of upward social mobility for them.
Why though then? Because there's more information technology, there's more proliferation of cell phones and internet phail raha hai, and telecommunication infrastructure is improving. More people are graduates. There are more people.
Sure.
Why has that not changed things for women? Because up to the possibility of not even having to go out to work is increasing, right? You can do stuff from home. I don't know, assume theoretically. Has that had no impact? Is it? I don't think there's like a conscious effort, like top down, to keep women suppressed.
No, I think there's a conscious effort to keep women.
Oh, great.
I mean, by top down, I'm not necessarily talking about the state. Although the state also, makes sure that it leaves no stone unturned as far as, suppressing female mobility in Pakistan is concerned. But when I say top down, I think, so here's a way of thinking about it, right? That who loses out the most if women start exercising choice?
Men.
It's men, right? It's like men who were used to, if in really evolutionary terms, it's men who were used to getting married off without ever having to do anything for themselves. It's men who didn't have to compete with half the population for a job because women weren't allowed to work. Yeah. It's men who weren't allowed to compete with women who are more educated than them for the same jobs, right? So remember, now women and men have similar levels of higher education attainment, but those women are just are not showing up in the labor force. So men have like a hall pass as far as getting all of those jobs are concerned, right?
Yeah.
So there's this great piece by Haris Gazdar where he basically talks about patriarchy as collective action by men. So collective action meaning men getting together and deciding that these are the interests that they want to protect.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research now that increasingly shows that at the level of the household, suppressing women's mobility is a conscious decision that is taken by male members of the household, right? And that is largely designed to protect the privileges that men have in a struggling economy, or to protect the privileges that men have in an economy that doesn't have a lot out there in the first place, right?
Right.
So I do think that there is a conscious, but then you also have the role of culture, right? And then you have the role of internalized ideas about the private realm and women being sort of remaining within those within those boundaries. But I feel that if despite the prevalence of information technology, despite the prevalence of women having access to new sources of information, the fact is that their day-to-day lives are still heavily mediated by male members of the household, and so exercising choice like that is difficult. What we can't say for sure at this point is if there is some unforeseen gender revolution happening in this country, where women at home are innovating or have found sources of income or have found ways to escape the patriarchal trap that they normally otherwise exist in, right? वो उसके effects हमें most likely we'll find out 10, maybe 15 years down the line. It's not apparent at this stage, at least.
What would that look like?
So I mean, one would be the Bangladesh way, right? Which is simply that the economy needs labor to grow, and women are always a source of cheap labor. You can underpay women and they work. That's what happened in Korea. That's what happened in Taiwan. That's what happened in Bangladesh, because you can force them to work. Right?
That framing makes it sound like a. That framing makes it sound like a marketing technique, bro. Ye kar lo, paise nahi milte.
It's like there's violence associated with it, right? Like you can discipline women and get them to work in factories for lower wage than men, and oftentimes उनकी मजबूरियां हैं तो उसके वो ये होता है. एक ये है, एक one way is this, that there might be some gender revolution in this country which looks a bit like this. The other is if it happens more insidiously. By insidiously, I mean like if it happens behind sort of closed doors. Which is partly what's happened in a place like Iran, for example, right? Where women were able to exercise sociability with other women through like local community groups, through the internet, through cell phones, through just generally sort of having greater access to sources of communication, and being able to build support groups, then being able to sort of enter the economy as small entrepreneurs, small business owners, home-based workers, and so on and so forth. Again, that is one route that is possible. अब हमें नहीं पता कि ये actually होता है नहीं, but this is.
We should get Soul Sisters on this.
I think Soul Sisters is a very good example of a women support group that of female sociability. क्योंकि लॉन्डो के पास क्या है, ठीक है, and लॉन्डो के पास तो snooker cafe था. So growing up, I grew up in a suburb of Lahore called Garntown, right? So Garntown was like an upper middle income suburb. हमारे पास snooker cafe भी था, हमारे पास gaming arcade भी था, हमारे पास local जो है वो general store भी था, cricket वाला ground भी था, हमारे पास एक स्कूल और एक पोस्ट स्कूल जिंदगी थी जिसमें हम बंक मार के कुछ कर सकते थे, राइट. ख़वातीन की तो मोबिलिटी पूरी पुलिस है ना. तो आपने अगर उनको स्कूल भी भेज दिया, स्कूल से उन्होंने घर आना है, घर से वो कोई बाहर क्रिकेट खेलने तो उन्होंने जाना नहीं, ना उन्होंने मार्केट प्लेस पे जाना है, ना उन्होंने अनसुपरवाइज किसी और पब्लिक स्पेस में जाना है. सो ये इंटरनेट जो है वो शायद सोशबिलिटी का आपको एक प्लेटफॉर्म दे दे, क्योंकि लड़कों के पास तो सोशबिलिटी हमेशा से थी. ये जो पाकिस्तान में, आई मीन दिस इज ऑब्वियसली समथिंग दैट everyone is aware of to a certain extent. They live it. So, this idea of the boys, right? The boys culture, like boys finding time. It's a product of this side of sociability that men grow up with, right? In Pakistan, which is largely because of the kind of mobility that they have access to. So maybe and I've seen, by the way, it's not Soul Sisters, stratified by urban upper middle income groups, but I've seen these kind of groups emerge on the internet in more middle class localities as well. The sociability that comes with, say, the local beauty parlor,
right.
teen run होता है, उसमें ख़वातीन customers होती हैं, that becomes a site. So I have this friend who's a sociologist and teaches in the US at Lewis and Clark College, Sidra Kamran. She works on women who work in all women economic spaces. So like Meena Bazaar in Karachi, beauty parlors, वहाँ पे औरतों की सोशबिलिटी के लिए कुछ आपको जगह मिल जाती हैं, बट वो बहुत लिमिटेड हैं, so one hopes that those would go.